It's only the Allianz Leagues. It's only February. Only a warm-up. Only a relegation. Only a bit of fun. It's only a debut. Only hundreds of competitive matches and thousands of players giving it their all. Only an unstoppable passion for GA across the whole nation. It's only 30 years of Allianz supporting the leagues, and we're not done yet. Only the leagues. Only the Allianz Leagues.
A grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lads. There's a small bit of a needle there. Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back to England, and now they're really rolling. And I can tell you, there won't be a cow milk from County Clare for at least a week.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the Allianz Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show. My name is Paul Rouse and I'm joined by the former Armagh footballer Oisín McConville and by Kevin Walsh, the former Galway footballer and manager. The Allianz Leagues have now passed the halfway point. All four divisions are taking shape. And of course, this weekend was Newbridge or nowhere. Kevin, were you surprised that Kildare won?
To be honest, Paul, I wasn't. I thought they had a great chance. And I suppose if you look at the form since the start of the year, you know, I don't need to be repeating what people have been saying, but the Dublin train seems to have pulled back a little bit. So, you know, Kildare are there with a bit of I suppose, a jump in their step and the new management, and they've been quite good. They've been quite good against Kerry as well. I don't think it was a massive fluke that they drew that game either. So, like, the form was pointing that they'd every chance. And I suppose if you're to, the bookies were 2 or 3 to 1, like, you'd wonder where that came from, because you know, Dublin have lost a lot of their main players at the minute. I know they're waiting for Conor Callaghan, Merchant, and a few other guys to come back, McCarthy. But the gel just doesn't seem to be there since the start of the year. Now, look at it. It is only the 4th game. Like you've mentioned, I would say that we're involved in our own management. We would say the final 3 games. This is where it starts now. And if you can get their final 3 games and get 5 or 6 points out of those, you're in a good place going to the championship, where some teams might win the first 4 and lose the last 2. They're not in a good place going to the championship. So it's not critical at the minute, but it's getting to that point.
You mentioned the Dublin train there, and that train was filled with quality players. How would you assess that train now?
To be honest, but Paul, like, unless it's proven different, the train isn't as full as it was. And you know, you look back at the likes of, you know, Paul Mannion, McCaffrey. They were super players, you know. Excuse me. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be replaced overnight. And it's a thing that, you know, excuse me, this has gone off.
No,
but just, you know, that type of a quality of player. Philly McMahon, you know, Johnny Cooper's just come back in. He's not getting any younger. You know, Paul Flynn. All those players aren't easily replaced. And it doesn't mean that this train go on forever. There's certainly, you'd expect they'd still be there fighting for the honours, but it just isn't definitely as strong as it was.
And by contrast, Kildare were full value for their victory, Oisín, and they played some very nice football.
They did, Paul, but I would argue that they've played some nice football probably in the last, you know, 4 or 5 years, and they haven't had the mental fortitude maybe to get over the line, or when it got a little bit more physical, they tended to, some of them tended to down tools. I think one thing I said about the start of the year when I seen the management team was that I didn't think that would be lacking anymore, and it was up to the fact now to see if they had that extra little bit of quality. I think Flynn, playing the way he plays, you know, he doesn't go by the script. He's sort of off script, and I think in a time where so many players play to a certain or conform to a certain way of playing the game, I think to have somebody like him just gives you that little bit of an X factor.
What's different about him?
I'd say there's probably a couple of players. I think we maybe touched on this a couple of weeks ago, but there's probably a couple of players within each team that will get away with, giving the ball away or having a shot from angles that, generally speaking, if one of the rest of the boys done it, that he would be absolutely aided in a video session. So probably in that way, I just think that his athleticism is incredible. His accuracy is something that can improve, but he definitely is somebody that gets you up off your seat. You're excited about what's going to happen. He's not going to go sideways or backwards. He's always looking to go down the throat of the opposition. I think we've seen that a couple of times. But I think, again, going back to Kildare, the main thing that I wanted to see from him was a bit more fight, a bit more aggression, not backing down from the challenge. I think they've done that, and I think they were playing probably against a better set-up Dublin team than we've seen in the first 3 games. I actually thought there was a lot of stuff yesterday that Dublin could take heart from. I know we said last week that at the end of the day, it was results now. It was about getting down the trenches and seeing could they pull out a victory, because yesterday was a big acid test for them. But at least they tried to. I thought at least they tried to identify some of the issues that were going on and to try to rectify them. And there was faults and flaws in that too. But if you consider I'm not even looking at the amount of chances that they missed, because I still think that that's something that will improve, iron itself out. But defensively, they were shambles for the first 3 games, and I think they were a little bit better at the weekend. And as I say, at least it looked as if they've gone away and addressed what the issues were. They were able to get the +1, +2 in. Their tackling is probably not as good as it was. Again, you're replacing certain players with players that maybe aren't of the same standard. But if I was thinking about that game yesterday, I would think that if Dublin, if they in the collated day, Dublin will take a bit from that game, and obviously Kildare will take a huge amount. It was a huge confidence builder for them. But not a complete disaster for Dublin, considering what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And other thing I think about Kildare is that the rate in which they kept the scoreboard ticking over, and the quality of chances they had. And I know they missed a few chances, and I suppose say in particular Flynn, but the fact that they're creating the opportunities that they are against Division 1 opposition, the same thing happened against Kerry the first day when they drew. I mean, they had plenty of opportunities to go ahead. Everybody talks about Kerry, that they malfunctioned for the last half hour of the game, but Kildare had loads of chances in that game too. So I think there's plenty for Kildare to be by. But I think the big thing for me was, did they have the fight? And could they get across the line in a game like that when, Dublin did throw everything at them?
I thought Kildare were good at running the ball forward into the wind in a way that Dublin couldn't quite do in the first half, and their goal was a prime example of it in the run from Ryan Houlihan, where he stepped 3 Dublin players on the way as an example. But in general, their defence was excellent. And there's a thing that they do in Leinster Rugby on Mondays when they do their video review session, where they do make a huge thing of scramble defense. So when it looks like they're holding the line, it looks like it's gone, looks like they've conceded a try, and they frame up who's in the picture, who's worked back to try and stop it, and they make a big issue about it. And Kildare, Kevin, 3 times scrambled back and stopped what really Dublin should have had 3 goals but didn't.
Yeah, and look, I know in particular one of the goals, you'd have to say how much they scrambled, Dublin should put it away. And they did scramble, and they got back there, and you saw the diving body going in. So the aggression levels are there, like Oisín's mentioned. And again, yes, that's something you'd have to always, maybe question on the Kildare side, and that's if they can bring that to them, like young Flynn going to midfield as well seems to have brought another energetic side. Probably looking back at the time, you had maybe Feely and Mulik and a few of those guys out there. They were huge fielders, but did they bring the athleticism that was there required? Maybe they didn't. So there's just changes going on there, which allows the body to get up and down the field. And if they can just bring that to a kind of a pattern, like you said, where they're willing to scramble and show in the trenches they're willing to work. Like they've always had ability. I've always felt that. And I think they're no different now. They've got really good forwards as well at the minute. They're fast. I suppose from Daniel Flynn side of it.
Where would you play him, Kevin? Where would you play Daniel Flynn?
Look at he looks like a super kind of a human being who has pace, speed, off the mark. Like watch him last night. Every time he gets the ball, he just turns and faces the opposition. Like we call it triple threat. He just turns to face you, and straight away, he's putting the fear of God in the defender, where a lot of other forwards just run out into lane 1, lane 5, and they kind of slow the ball up. And like if you can use him like that, get the ball up quick enough, the opposition will find it very hard to get back and set up, because if he turns and takes you on straight away, they're on the back foot. But where would I play him? I'd say because of his natural size, I don't think he'd probably be able to last a match around the middle of the field. Probably full forward is probably his place, but it's to get him, doing the damage in the middle 3 lanes. And I suppose, and that's his challenge. His challenge will be later on in the year when the defenses are really set up. Like he'll have to have a plan B as well, and maybe his strength and his power when he goes at you, it may not work if there's 2 or 3 people around him, and it's open a bit at the minute. So he is playing well at the minute, but again, unless he's developed something from the years gone by, there will be areas you'll be able to take him that he won't be overly effective and may not be in the game long enough.
He clearly plays a lot off the cuff, and his natural ability is absolutely outstanding. I thought he was technically the best player in the field on Sunday. To what extent do you just say to somebody like Daniel Flynn, just go out and play there, or are you willing to accept a certain amount of things just go haywire?
Yeah, look at you. Yeah, those type of players, they have to be allowed to be an entrepreneur as well. Them are the guys that will make a team tick. So, like, it's often important to not take everything off him, but it's also often important that his teammates will be able to create space for him, because if he gets space is what he needs most. So, I would say that the team needs to work around him as much as they do let him go off the cuff. So, look, he's a super player. I wouldn't in any way try to stop him from doing what he does, but maybe try and get to a point where he's actually involved in the game a lot more.
Yeah, Oisín, where would you play him?
Yeah, I'd play. I like him at 14. I think it gives an extra option, but again, against maybe a Tyrone or somebody like that, he'll probably have to spend some time at 11, because he'll get very frustrated in the 14. I think that's what happened to him last year in the Leinster final. I think there was times where he hadn't seen the ball for a certain amount of time, and the ball goes in, and then the natural reaction for a guy like him is to trying to take 2, 3, 4 men on, stick it over the bar, and then the confidence starts to wane and stuff like that. So the more he can get into the game and do simple things. But I also think that probably the 2 boys in the corners could definitely play off him a little bit more. When he goes on those runs and he's inclined to get bottled up sometimes, I mean, you have to stalk him. You have to stalk him as a corner forward and get those
come off the shoulder on him.
Yeah, bits and pieces off him, or just be ready. I mean, I know that's what I'd be doing. I think there's probably 3, 4 simple scores for one of the corner forwards or some of the lads in the half forward line. To when he gets the ball, he draws 2 or 3 men. You know what I mean? If he gets bottled up, to just pop it off. And as I say, there's 2 or 3 or 4 maybe easy scores every game off.
If you look at Kildare, they're at the draw with Kerry and beating Dublin, and at the same time, they probably need another win if they're to stay up, with the way the run of the games is going. Oisín?
I think that what they've done so far is admirable. I think they'll be happy enough with the way things have gone. I think they'll feel as if they left it behind them a little bit against Tyrone. So I think that's why yesterday was so important to them. And I think you're right. I think one more win. I think the Armagh Kildare game up next is a crucial one for both teams, probably.
And they've Monaghan at home in the last after Paddy's weekend, which is a big one. I think whoever loses that is probably in trouble. Do you think Dublin will be relegated?
I think there's a very good chance now, and I think the result in Ballybuffet the other night definitely doesn't help Dublin, because Tyrone, the Dublin play Tyrone in Oma. So that's going to leave it very, very difficult for them to shake 2 points up there. So that leaves probably Dublin in a lot of bother if they lose that one. I mean, the maximum they can get then is 4 points.
You were at that you were at that game. It was a very nice jacket you were wearing, actually, on the telly. The Tyrone, what's happening with Tyrone?
Well, I have to say, Paul, Tyrone for 35 minutes. Not for 35 minutes, for about 28 or 30 minutes, played just such controlled, it just felt like very controlled, capable, professional, modern day football. And honestly, like the way they moved the ball, the opportunities they created, just the way they manipulated the ball at times was definitely a joy to watch. And I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, having to walk through the lanes and stuff like that, but they mixed it up beautifully. I thought they were very, very, very good for, say, 28 or 30 minutes. And then they fell into some sort of black hole up in Ballybuffet, and they couldn't quite find a way out of it.
Donegal looked buried.
They did.
They looked like they were totally off the pace.
Donegal looked really poor, I thought. Really, really poor. I mean, it's testament to them how they got a result out of that. But the thing I took away from the game was that for 30 odd minutes, it was so characteristic of what you would expect from Tyrone, and control, and the players that they were getting on the ball, and the spaces that Canavan was able to get into and walk other players into the game. And I would have to say the last 20 minutes was so uncharacteristic. I mean, like, just pot shots, trying to kick saline ball over the bar, into a little bit of a wind. It didn't feel right. And the first place you go to when you see Tyrone doing that is fitness. You know what I mean? But I didn't really think it was. I didn't actually think it was a fitness thing. Now, fitness can obviously impair your decision making, but I didn't even think it was that. I just thought the wrong players on the wrong ball at the wrong time, and even when they had the right players on the ball, just making the wrong decisions. And it must be so frustrating having watched a half hour of what was very, very clinical football. First of all, going at half time, the game was a draw at half time. But to go into the game at half time, not being up by 5 or 6 points, playing into the teeth of a wind, as I say, playing control football, to come out and play the way they play full sport sometimes doesn't make any sense, but none of that made any sense to me. I mean, like, at half time, you just expect Tyrone to come out second half and blow Donegal away, or certainly blow them away in Tyrone style. So that means probably a 4-point win or a 5-point win. But the fact that Donegal stuck in there, Conor O'Donnell was fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and he spent a lot of the time being marked by McKernan and sometimes by Hampsey. They passed him on. Milo was on him sometimes. McGeary. Like, Donegal's tactic of playing Ray McHugh in the full forward line yielded 1 point, and also Milo was absolutely destroying Donegal going the other way, because McHugh didn't follow him. He stayed in the full forward line. That was a weird one for me. If that was purely down to nullifying Conor Myler, it didn't work. But then when McHugh come out then started playing his more traditional plays, he started to have a bit more of an effect on the game. you know, he was able to marshal things defensively a little bit. He wasn't panicking on the ball. I thought Donegal's last score was very good. Oisín Gallen, somebody who'll have to play, you know, as the summer comes in. I don't know what the story is with him. Obviously, some sort of injury, but he looked very sharp when he came on as well. Mogan created those last couple of opportunities just purely by his unselfish running. Niall O'Donnell looked good for periods as well. Shane O'Donnell. So like, I can't answer the question how Donegal won the game, but they won it.
So you were up in Ballybuffet at that, and Kevin, you were at the far end of the country watching Cork and Galway play in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And if you look at the scores from all 4 divisions, most teams were scoring 10, 12, max 14 points. And then the final score in Division 2 was Galway, 3 goals and 22 points, Cork, 2 goals and 17 points on a Saturday. What was happening?
Yeah, I was down there. It was a great game to watch because it was loads of scores. Look, it was 1-12 apiece at half time. So I just remember saying, Jesus, that would normally be the final score of most games. So look, at both teams were going at it. It was wide open, to be honest. It you know, it felt like a challenge match looking in at it, to be honest with you. You know, the intensity levels weren't that high. I suppose Galway done all they could do. You have to beat what's in front of you. But you know, the standard.
Were you impressed?
I find it hard to know because I know that there was no test, there was no test whatsoever. So again, the big question for Galway going forward is like we said about Kildare, is when the test is there and people have to go in the trenches. That's when the real test will be there. So look, I was impressed if you were to call it a very good open challenge match. Impressed with the running. Shane Walsh running through the middle was superb, but was met with nothing. And we all know that the bigger teams will put that little psychological test on the people that they'll be watching. So look, to be honest with you, it's a great game that Galway have got out of the way, because I think the last 3 games, and they're well set up now, because the last 3 games for Galway are going to be tough, and they need
away to Derry. They're going away to Derry.
Away to Derry, away to Roscommon, I think home to Clare.
Yes, and before that, they play Offaly in Salt Hill. Next. Next Sunday.
I'm sorry, I totally forgot about that.
That hurts a little bit, Kevin, but that's fine. This will be in the dressing room.
Yeah, you can use that in the dressing room. But look at again, that's on Saturday. So look at Offaly, you know, and I haven't even seen Offaly yet, but you know, I thought they were going poorer than I would have expected them to go. I know they're new up there, but they obviously got a good result against me. They should have won by all accounts. So I'd be hoping that they would put a big challenge against Galway at the weekend, and for both their sake, it's now come to a point where, you know, it's not just about winning; it's about being tested as well.
Sorry, Oisín.
No, just was there any shape or make to what Cork were doing at the weekend, or what way did it look?
Oisín, I couldn't find it. I couldn't see it. It was a lot of individual stuff. It was wide open. You know, and like there's little things. You know, even 2 kickouts went over the top. It was quite breezy, so you might say that it was hard to play. But you know, 2 or 3 kickouts went way over the midfield, and I mean, you had three full back line for Cork standing behind their man. Like, I mean, 3 of them. So the ball would bounce twice after the kick out, and the Galway forward runs onto it. So for me, that's awful naive. I would say there's an awful naivety there. But Cork are obviously quite young. They don't. A lot of the players I didn't even recognise. But that, you know, if they've any chance, they're going to have to wipe up all that stuff and wipe it quickly, because it was wide open, and you know, they're going to really struggle, in my opinion, unless they get their act together.
Will they get relegated?
From what I saw on Saturday night, every chance. You know, no, I was up in Down, and I was in what do you call that again? But
were you in Navan to see Meath against Galway as well?
No, I missed that one. I mean, that was actually in Galway.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
No, I was away with another sport on the weekend. But look at Down were very poor as well, I'll be honest with you. So it looks like there's a massive split in this division. I haven't seen Offaly yet. It looks like there's a top 3 at the minute, and a massive struggle. You know, when we look back at Division 2 maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it looks like the bottom of Division 2 at the minute is very, very poor. I could be wrong on that in 3 or 4 weeks' time, but it's going to be a scrap between 3 or 4 teams that just aren't at the races at the minute.
Meath, Offaly, Cork and Down, really.
Yeah.
It's 2 of those 4.
If you look at those, after 4 games played, Down have 1 point, Cork have 1 point, Offaly have played 3 games and have 1 point, and Meath have 4 points. Meath have 2 points with 2 draws. So none of those 4 teams have won a match. so far. That's a fair statement. Now they're all playing each other in the last couple of games, and this is where relegation is now staring 4 teams straight in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at again, you know, and Clare, in fairness to Clare will always go in the trenches for you, and that's the difference.
Yeah,
the other teams at the minute, I'm not so sure are they going in the trenches at the minute, and you know, I'd be fairly sure that every time Clare go out, they will put up a, you know, they make you fight.
How do you build a team that will go in the trenches?
I suppose, Paul, look at you know, there has to be that people understand their role as well, and they have to believe in what you're doing as management. I mean, that, you know, it can't be just like maybe off the cuff, like you mentioned early on about Daniel Flynn. Those players, and you know, those players that can do all those things, of course, those guys can do it naturally. But there's a lot of other players in that group that needs to be, I suppose, put into areas where they can excel. And you know, for a management to get there, number one, you get your kickouts right. Absolutely, you have 25 kickouts every game. You're facing 25 kickouts. There's 50 stoppages, and if you can't get your team to be reasonably set up for both of those, you're going to struggle. Again, I've mentioned about stuff of understanding how to maybe just the simple stuff of how to play in front, where to play in front. When the ball is more than one kick away, where do I stand? All those things have got to be developed, because if they're not, you're just going to be under fire all day. And you know, like you mentioned Daniel Flynn early on, Shane Walsh. It's now gone to a stage where all those guys are going to be targeted, and they always will be targeted. And they, you know, and there'll be physical people on them. How can your teammates help that guy then as well for him to excel? How can, you know, little bits and pieces that can be done? And I think all that will fall in for the team to actually get a bit of belief. But look, it needs to be a little bit structured, and I didn't see it with Cork.
Would you, if you were playing against somebody like Daniel Flynn and you were, for example, a Cork defence, you say they were totally open, they let someone through, would you drop someone back? Would you drop 2 back? Would you play a +1? Would you drop a centre back in to play with the full back? What exactly would you do?
Look, again, the biggest thing of all this is, without anybody going back, Paul, is the understanding of how to mark that man from in front when the ball is more than one kick away. Because straight away, if you were there and you're putting pressure on the kicker who can't put it in front of Flynn, and Flynn wants to run into space as close to the goal as he can. Now, straight away, by just doing that, Flynn has no choice but to come out an extra 20, 30 yards to receive the ball, and the kicker will be under pressure. So that's a simple little thing to coach players, and I think that's been left out massively. That's number one. Number two then is, if you can delay and deny, over time you'll get the spaces back there to be blocked up on Flynn, and let him do all the damage he wants in lane 1 and lane 5. And again, let him run out there and win ball. But it's about coaxing pressure and all that type of stuff. So, look, there's massive ways of taking these players, I suppose, into their own ugly zone, which they don't like. But there's a lot of work to be done in the field for that now. So, at the minute, you know, our Cork there are down there. From what I've seen, Division 2, I don't see them being at that level at the minute. It wouldn't take a lot, but it does take a bit of practice. What would you do, Oisín?
Well, I was thinking about you know, the Dublin situation and the fact that more or less they played Johnny Cooper as a sweeper most of the time yesterday, and I was thinking, when Cork will be playing against a team like Galway, who love hitting that full forward lane and love getting runners off the shoulder, surely, you know, that would have been an option at times. I go back to Tyrone last year and under the two boys after coming in fresh from Mickey Hart, and people wanted to see a change, and probably players wanted to see a change. So what they did to begin with was they completely pushed up on every team. They swarmed kickouts, and they played a lot of heads-up, man-to-man football. They come into the Donegal game, and I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but I would say that as a surprise, they played Frank Burns as a full-time sweeper. No, they didn't put any frills around it. It wasn't a different +1. Frank Burns just stayed there and he played as a traditional sweeper, and he was absolutely excellent. And the reason why he was excellent, because Donegal wanted to get McBrearty on the ball, coming off the shoulder. You know, when he comes round, and many times as he kicked, and many points of all of his scores as he kicked on the loop, I'd say hundreds. And they completely negated that and stopped it. And I just think that Cork, just a little bit, you know, to think outside the box a little bit sometimes and think, you know, how do we become more solid? How do we not give away? What do you say, Paul? 322?
322 to 217, I want to talk about the 217 in a minute as well, but
yeah. No, definitely. But the 322, I mean, like really and truly, to be competitive, you're going to need to have that. Realistically, like, you know what I mean. So, the fact that they're shipping as many scores as they are, surely somebody's saying, "Listen, lads, you know, maybe we'll try something different, or even just to try that, whether it be a sweeper or, you know, whether it be, you know, giving up the kick out in odd time, not being obsessed with always pushing up on it." So as Kevin says, that simple long ball over the top. Imagine, you know, going down to Cork and them giving you the kick out and getting bodies back and making it difficult for you. That doesn't have to be for the whole game. I don't like teams giving up the kick out, but sometimes you just have to do that in order to create that organisation and make that a starting point and sort of walk from there. But to try and do that in reverse is very, very difficult. To try and that ball goes over the top and try and get bodies back in there and slow it down, it's just not going to happen. You know, modern day players they're just too quick, and they sense an opportunity. You know, like as soon as that ball is kicked out, player wins it. You know, they'll determine in the next 2 or 3 seconds if we're heading for goal or we're happy enough to take a point. Do you know what I mean? Or any score will do. So it's just too easy to play against. You got to make yourself a bit more difficult to play against. And,
yeah, look, Oisín, I spotted, I saw them there, and in particular against the Breeze. You know, Cork pushed up and everything, and there's times there where you should have been maybe giving it off a while, because if it goes over the midfield, it's straight in the full forward straight away. So when you're against the wind, it probably takes 3 kicks to get the ball up. If you're with it only takes 2. You have to balance that out. When is the best time to push up? When not push up? Can you take the guys down the sidelines, slow it up, get a good defensive shape? Like they did try to get a sweeper back now and again, but just I don't even know what the sweeper knew he was actually at when he was there, because that's massive as well. Any sweeper should see man, see ball. You should see the man behind him as much as where the ball is coming from at that angle. So again, it's just to be equipped with those tools of understanding your job is massive as well. And like I said, Oisín, it has to be varied a little bit. It can't be just push up and leave completely open the back, in particular with a Gale. I mean, it doesn't make sense whatsoever.
Like they do miss Powder. Don't get me wrong. Like, and he fulfills a good bit of that role, and he's a good reader of the game, and he'll stop a lot of that. But you know what I mean? Missing one person shouldn't leave you conceding 322.
You were down with a whole lot of football people in Cork, Kevin, for the weekend, or you were down certainly on Saturday. What's the atmosphere around Cork football like as an outsider? How do you find it?
You know, just from, I suppose, the area we were in and from the comments, it seemed to be more about, well, we'll accept it, kind of the hurling is our game at the minute. That's what I could kind of gather a little bit. But to be fair, when I was with a number of football coaches, so it was just in and out fairly quickly in an hour and a half, a bit of a forum or conference. But again, just wasn't hanging around too much. But look at the Rebel Oak, and they're actually trying to push it out. There was 100 coaches there from different clubs, so they're obviously looking at ways to improve. And you know, more than you've mentioned Kildare there, Oisín, you'd be hoping that the management teams would have a balance to it, not just all footballers. So we'll see later on where Kildare go with that. Like, you know, there has to be a challenging environment in your own management, and if everyone thinks the same way around the table, you know, the results won't be the best way. So you need to have that challenging environment with a back-home team that will actually say, hold on a second, I don't think you're doing this right, or could you improve on this? And that's the only way you're going to do that. So again, you know, I'd be hoping that maybe Cork and their management team, that they will start to, I don't mean you in fairness, they're very new in. I'd be hoping that they'll be looking at all aspects to improve as quickly as possible.
Any management team I was ever involved in, we went more for anarchy rather than challenge me.
Yeah.
It's probably the opposite end of the. Before we move on from that game, Galway, okay, they scored 322. They're comfortable, but they conceded 217. How did that happen?
Obviously a bit open as well. But to be fair, I suppose when they found themselves maybe level at half time and maybe they could see the Cork where they could take them in a shootout. I think that's important to understand as well. For instance, like when we were playing back over the years ago, you know, we'd have been very, very tight. We'd have never been tight, but there was obviously games we'd go after. So for instance, we played Derry in Tuam Stadium, and we did feel without shooting at the time, and we found ourselves 7 or 8 points down at half time. It was a kind of a, but we still, I think we won at 5-15 to 2-15. So we weren't overly worried about the 2-15 because we did try to do something that we might need to do again. So sometimes you will have games and that management might do that. So I'd be hoping that that's what happened with Galway the last week, that they had been quite tight. So maybe they just went after them to have a shootout and do as much as they could. So, but again, it was a little bit worrying to concede 2-17. Again, quite open at the back, but maybe they had their own reasons for that.
Kevin, the last time you were on the podcast, Jack O'Connor was on with you, and at that stage he was Kildare manager. Now he's Kerry manager. How would you rate it? Do that again?
Don't blame me for the follow.
No, you followed them into it, Kevin.
Everybody knows that was Paul's fault, Kevin. No worries.
It was my first time on it, and I got blamed for everything.
So, how would you rate the job that Jack's doing?
Look, as you're Kerryers have been a sleeping giant for a long time. we would have come across them numerous. Like they have possibly the best group of footballers in the country. There's no doubt about that. They've tightened up at the back, which was really, really important. Again, they drew with Kildare, so they were challenged there. But I think if Kerry get the back right, I've always said this, with this group of players, I expect them to win All-Ireland. Tyrone...
Do you think they will win the All-Ireland?
I actually do. It's early to say that, but I do. I think they will. I think Paddy Tally will help there as well. I think that...
what does he do? What does he do when he comes in?
Paddy brings energy. He has loads of ideas, loads of drills. He's positive. So he will bring something to Kerry, providing Kerry allow that. I mean, I would have felt that in particular, down the south, Cork, Kerry, while other teams have been moving on in the GA. I said this before in your podcast as well. I think they've been slow to move on it. So I think Kerry are starting to do that now. Understanding, I suppose, how to cover the spaces in the right areas, the right times. It just can't be all flash. So they're working very hard. I see Sean O'Shea back on the full back line last night. Clifford to be back there, Paddy. So they're getting numbers back now, and they're breaking the pace. They have that pace, and they've got 2 or 3 lethal forwards, which is hard to beat. So I think they'll be very, very, obviously they'll be close, but I do expect them to push on this year.
See, Kevin, when you mentioned about just how they've been reluctant, I suppose, to move at the times. Just going back to Cork, do you think Cork would really benefit from somebody from the outside? Is that what you mean? Like, as far as, I know you mentioned other sports, but would they benefit from somebody from the outside? And I'm not trying to do Keith.
No.
Job. He's early in the job. Like, he needs to be given.
Totally.
Do you know what I mean? Like, long term or at some stage.
Well, I think Oisín, to answer the question, if there's somebody inside who has the thought process maybe to move it on, you don't actually need someone from outside. But if it means somebody from outside has to come in to actually at least challenge where Cork are at by bringing new things to the table, I think that's badly needed. Because Kerry have been very, very slow. Kerry have had super players the last 5 or 6 years, and I would think that some of them have missed a boat maybe of challenging a bit higher if they had looked at the transitioning of what's happening in Gaelic football. It mightn't be the prettiest. It might be against all the morals of all the purists. Yeah. But do you want to win, or do you want to be competitive, or do you want to just play your social football and enjoy what you do? Like, those questions are huge. Do you want to win, or do you want to play social football, or what you call traditional? Now, look at, that's the question. So I suppose whoever does that, and change is very difficult. So if someone comes into Cork, in particular, an insider, and I had it in Galway myself, is you'll have the old timers chirping over the fence. You'll have that type of stuff. So if you're going to be able to, you'll have to be strong and be saying, hold on, this is what I have to do. I know what I have to do to get to a team to a certain level. I'm going to stick with it. I'll take a bit of flack as I do it. So you need to be strong in those areas, because the traditionals of that will challenge you.
And do you, presumably, Kerry are now so stung by repeated defeat that that's where the change is rooted, and that's why the capacity for change is happening now.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, it was slightly happening before now, because they were getting bodies back. I'm not so sure that they've brought the level that, the understanding of the marking in front isn't there yet. There's a fair bit of, because they can kind of do it, because they're right beside. They're physically good players. They can mark very tight. I think they can get better. I think if they can maybe just look another line, another bit forward, and I think Paddy Tally may bring that to them, providing he's allowed to do his work, which it looks like at the minute he will be.
Are you impressed with the way Mayo have gone at the league?
I am. I have to be honest with you. I think they've made changes in a lot of personnel, and even yesterday again, you know, they had to fight, and young fellas came in. The Paddy Durkin come on, you know, younger lads that you know you wouldn't even know are getting game time, and they're all doing their business. So you'd have to say that you'd be impressed with how they're performing at the minute and the results to date.
Carney looks good. He looks like a smart footballer as well, and kind of what Mayo are crying out for in that area. Would you start Aidan O'Shea on the Mayo team?
Honestly, no. And I think if you asked me this question 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be giving the same answer. And to be fair, I think he could have a massive impact in coming in as well, because I just think that he's targeted as well. So he I don't know. It's hard to know. You asked the question with Daniel Flynn early on. You know, where's his best position? And that's still very hard to know, because, you know, I heard Kevin McStay roaring and shouting about a game down in Tuam about 18 months ago, but they finally found the place for Aidan O'Shea. He'd been in there for 10 years before that, but it just happened to be one game where Galway were completely opened, and all of a sudden there was a new energy. The bottom line is this: if you double team Aidan O'Shea in the square, he won't do damage. That's the bottom line. So where do you play him? And I'm not trying to, you know, because he has been super for Mayo over the years, but I just think it looks like to me that Mayo tick better when there's no focal point like that, you know. And would I start? I be certainly looking at maybe as an impact in different areas. He can come midfield, he can come on centre forward, he can come on full forward, and there could be 10 minutes damage there done more than what you might do in 50 minutes if you start him. So, you know, it's the, I suppose it's when you put him in and the expectation there.
Oisín, were you disappointed with Armagh?
Not overly. I think definitely the last 2 weeks have been a bit of a lesson for us, but I think Armagh were extremely competitive yesterday. It was a game that they definitely could have won. I think, you know, it showed up old frailties in that, you know, we give away the ball towards the end of the game, you know, when we should be minding a little bit better. But there was, as I said, there was things to work on, but Armagh still have a huge amount of learning to do as far as, you know, playing at this level, you know, on a consistent basis. So I would be a little bit disappointed in the fact that we were beating the game, but also sometimes you take a lot more away from defeat, and I think Armagh seemed to take a lot from even that drawn game against Monaghan. So I think Armagh will take a lot from yesterday, and I think a lot of the young lads who have come in will realise that, you know, the standards that they have set for themselves in the first couple of games are standards that need to be met week in, week out. But if you had given me this start to the league at before there was a ball kicked, I would have snapped your hand off for it. And I still think that Armagh are in a good place. And I think that the more of what we've seen in the Monaghan game and the Mayo game, the more highlight reels and the more video work that Armagh do on the simple things that they've done wrong, I think there's an area for massive improvement there. And when I say massive improvement, on top of what Armagh have done so far, as I say, it's a position that I didn't think we'd be in, but I'd be never happy with being beat, but I'd be happy enough with the way things went.
Kevin, in the middle of the league, there were 7 games in 9 weeks, and obviously the next weekend was meant to be a free weekend, but it's not now a free weekend. There are 5 matches on that were put off because of the storm last weekend. Is it possible to really change a team across these weeks? Is it possible to get much coaching done? Can you introduce things?
It's look, time wise, it's a little bit it's hard, but at the same time, you know, you're probably one day every week, maybe 2. You're actually trying to introduce these things probably since whenever the lads got back. So you'll be trying them out. I suppose it's what personnel can carry them out the best for you as well. Because look, most teams will have 4 or 5 or 6 players who are first on the team sheet anyway. Then you've got the other group, or if you have 5 who the maybes, and you have 5 who subs challenging 5 lads on the bottom. So you have to find your best players is the biggest thing. So I would say the first 4 games, like you've mentioned, there's a lot of that going on. But the last 3 games, you need to be starting to get really solid in what you think, because even if you have lost, even take Dublin. If Dublin could come out and take 4 of the last 6 points, or maybe even 5, I think that will keep them up. They're in a really good place heading in the championship. After all the heat has been on them, and again, take the Galways, or take somebody who's on the opposite end of the top. They don't really want to have a fall off in the last 3 games, because if you do, even though you're safe in your division, you're going into a championship, but not the best place to be. So these last 3 games are really, really crucial. And get your personnel in, whoever can do the job you want done to the best capacity, and trying. These 3 games need to be sorted out now. So I expect that's what most teams are at the minute.
I was talking to two Mead lads last night, which in fairness is never enjoyable at the best of times, but they were talking so much about the importance of a manager putting the best players in the best positions and actually picking your team properly. And it seems to me to be one of those fundamentals of football that kind of can sometimes be left to one side. It's so basic, but putting the best players in the best positions. At what point in the league must you know that, or are you still trying to work this out?
I suppose, Paul, look at it depends on your manager. I mean, your manager could be first time in. Take for instance, the Cork manager is only in, so to be fair to him, we have to give him a bit of time here. But if you have managers who are there 2 and 3 years, they haven't a whole pile to learn about their players, so they should be tweaking. So they should have no problem having their best team in their best positions coming into the last 2 or 3 league games. There's no reason why they can't. James Horan at the minute has a lot of youngsters. It's probably a bit of debate going on in his head. Well, which of these guys are good enough to step in? But then you have other. I suppose, look, Paul, they're all. It's different for each manager. But as I said to you, there's no reason why a manager that's in for 2 or 3 years isn't 100% sure of his team coming into the last 2 league games. I don't see why that would happen.
Oisín, Jack O'Connor, I was reading Jack O'Connor's book there. Things like I'm not obsessed or anything, but I was reading his book, and he was talking about putting a bomb under a team sometimes, and basically just dropping somebody for, even if they didn't necessarily need it, just to kind of make sure everyone was awake. Would you ever do that?
It's interesting that you should mention putting a bomb under Jack O'Connor, or that Jack O'Connor put the bomb under his team, because you put a bomb under him last year. That's why he's in Kerry.
It's an absolutely outrageous thing to say.
What putting a bomb under a team? Sometimes, if things are going well, Paul, I mean, the tendency is for a lot of managers is to try and see how long you can get out of that. See if there's, is there a real need to upset the apple cart? But I do think that every now and again, I used to think that Jim Gavin used to do that with personnel changes. Something, you look at Dublin, you think this is a steady team, and it'll always be one little change that maybe you didn't see coming down the lane. So I think that used to keep a lot of those Dublin guys on their toes. I think if he's trying to start manufacturing things, such and such said this about us, or that sort of thing. So I think if you start manufacturing things, I think players will find you out very, very quickly, especially the modern day player. But I suppose the best bomb anybody can get under them is a haphazard performance or something like that. And I think if you're Jack O'Connor, in particular, you've had that. I mean, Kildare for 35 minutes was a shambles. So, when people talk about, how good Kerry are and how good they can be, and that they're that they're out in front as far as the race for Sam Maguire is concerned, that's 100% right. But there's also another side to this Kerry team. There's another side. We've seen it last year. In fact, we've seen it for the last 2 or 3 years in particular, and we've seen it. We have real solid evidence of that happening, early on in this league. So, I think if you're trying to manufacture a bomb, that's not the right way to go about it. But I think there'll always be things that you're not happy with. There's always something within that squad that you can pick out and say, listen, lads, we're setting standards for ourselves, and this doesn't meet those standards. But as I say, if you're trying to manufacture things, or you're posting what Kevin Walsh says up on the dressing room, I mean, you're going nowhere fast.
There's another really big weekend for football people, or a really big match for football people next weekend in Division 4, and it's Sligo against Cavan. Now, Cavan have been solid, but not spectacular in the league so far, but tipping along. And Sligo looked like they were tipping along, and then went to Tipperary and lost by 4 points. It seems that whoever wins that game next weekend, or whoever loses that game, more to the point, is in a lot of bother. Oisín, how do you see it going?
I think Sligo created an extraordinary number of chances and couldn't win that game. I think we only seen a snapshot of them. I know that was they featured from Division 4. We only seen a snapshot. Kevin might be able to give me numbers, but I think he kicked a huge amount of wides. But they are creating chances. They are very much an improved team. I thought at the start of the league that they would be promoted. I think that's a big bump on the road for them yesterday. And I looked at the Cavan lineup. I looked at the players they took off the bench. The Cavan still look really, really solid and look way too good for that division. So I can't see anything other than Cavan winning that game quite convincingly.
Can I ask you before we move on? Last week we talked about your Dundalk Institute of Technology team that didn't play in the final of the Trench Cup, and it sent a letter or sent an email into the authority that runs it in Croke Park. Have you heard? Did you get a reply yet?
Yeah, we got a disciplinary notice, so we're up in front of whatever the C's, many C's is in that.
7 or 8 C's, yeah.
Yeah, we are up in front of that now in the next week or so. So we were asked if we wanted to make representation, so we'll go and have a chat.
Will you go yourself?
Hopefully, yeah.
And have you ever been in a disciplinary scenario before?
Once, maybe when I was playing.
What happened?
I got a red card against Donegal, but I got it rescinded because it was totally 100% innocent. You could at least keep a straight face.
That's why the mic fall.
Yeah, so yeah, that's exactly. It must be it. It must be it, Kevin. It must be it. If in the break weekend, would you play a challenge match in the break weekend, Kevin? If your team wasn't out?
I don't think I would, on the basis there might be need for it if I felt there was other players weren't getting game time or. But I'd be honest with the coaching part of something for me. Like, it's great going around the country and all these challenge matches and people feel good about themselves. But I mentioned the challenge me environment early on. The challenge needs to be with the players as well. So, take them out of the comfort zone and put them into the ugly zone. You call it what you like. The coaching is massive. Like, we don't get these guys too often. So even to like we spoke early on about, what do you do with the kickouts? Do you press them? Do you not press them? Is the wind against you? Is it for you? Are you down to 14 men? Are you losing the game? Are you winning the game? All the what-if scenarios, you really need to be pushing those out. So to answer your question, I'd far and away rather to be getting those coaching hours into players to give them the confidence that they know where they're at. And secondly, you'll find out things as well when you do that. So to answer your question, I probably wouldn't.
Oisín, did you like challenge matches?
Not particularly. The more you're, I suppose, like, it's easy when you're trying to break onto the scene. I suppose the more matches you get, the better. The more opportunities you get to shine, the better. And then they just become a trudge. I think for established players, unless you're coming back from injury or something, and you need a game under your belt. But no, I didn't particularly like challenge matches, and one of the reasons for that was that Armagh used to take us to Navan every April. Before we played in the Ulster Championship, because it was to tighten us up for the Ulster Championship. And what it used to do was we used to go up there, we used to get absolutely hammered, and we used to get battered as well. It used to be all-out warfare. I remember the first time I played. Kevin Rayleigh, I think. Mark
Riley, cornerback. Yeah, he's a good footballer.
He was marking me. I was in my first year, probably 18 years of age, and Kerry and Jerry Reid started a row at the top end of the pitch, and as you do, you sort of start to amble towards it, and Mark Riley just tapped me in the shoulder. He said, "I wouldn't bother." And me and him stood down in the bottom corner of the pitch while everybody else got stuck in. And I come away in the car that day and I said to myself, "Well, thank God we'll not have to go up there next year," because, as I say, we were getting a good walloping in both facets of the game. But every year, Paul, for the next 5 years, we were in Meath, in Navan, in April, and it was a lesson. It gave us an idea of where we needed to be, but it was demoralising as much as anything else. But I think when you talk about teams playing challenge matches, most teams will play challenge matches just to give the guys who, as Kevin touched on, the guys who aren't getting football, so the next 15 or the boys who are coming back from injury or stuff like that. But most teams will probably play a challenge match this weekend of some sort, and probably you won't see a lot of the guys who've already featured in the league.
Yeah, so essentially, apart from the 5 games next weekend, Westmeath, Longford, very, very hot local derby, vital for both promotion and relegation there. From Annalise, same scenario in terms of who's going up and who's going down. Galway and Offaly, Wexford and Tip, and Sligo and Cavan. So it's no Division 1 matches next weekend. But when it comes back the following weekend, it's Dublin Tyrone in Oma, which is a really, really mouth-watering prospect. The last 2 All-Ireland champions coming against each other, both in relegation bother, and it is something to savour. We'll finish there, but I wasn't sure if I was going to say anything about this, but I think we can't pretend that there's not a war happening at the moment. And you can say this is a sports podcast and we shouldn't say anything about that war, but I don't think that's right, and I don't think it's right for 2 reasons. I think it's not right, first of all, because of the people that are involved. There are people from Ukraine and Poland and all across Eastern Europe who live in this country now, are involved in GA clubs, and people from Latvia, Lithuania, all across those neighbouring countries, not just in Ukraine, who are in here, and I think it's solidarity with them. But it matters, second of all, to say something, I think, because of the manner in which sport is used, or has been used, by Putin over recent years, from staging the Winter Olympics in Sochi, from staging the World Cup, and how the people who run international sport have managed to sell their souls to somebody who has been appalling, not just in the last week, but has been appalling for more than a decade. And success in the Olympic Games for Vladimir Putin was an exercise fundamentally in nationalism. And there's a direct line between that and how he conducts himself in sport and in the world in general. And it goes into our own houses as well. It's not just something that's happening on the far side of the world. Like, the Champions League is sponsored by Gazprom, who are a Russian company, extremely tight to Putin. Aeroflot have been a sponsor of Manchester United over the last number of years. Again, entirely wrong. And in all of this, there was something really striking happened in the last couple of days, and the lead was taken by players. You saw the players of Poland, led by Lewandowski, the brilliant Bayern Munich centre forward, and Sweden, and now the Czech Republic, declining to play against Russia. And you see fencing teams declining to play against Russia, and again, skiers declining to play against Russia. And it comes down to it. FIFA were offered an opportunity to redeem themselves at the weekend and to say that they would throw Russia out of the World Cup. And once again, Gianni Infantino and the person who calls Putin his friend failed the test. And I think it's important to say that and to stand in solidarity, albeit it is just words that we can offer. Thank you to Larry Ryan for running this podcast, to Raf Rocca, to Jack Neville, to Tony Lean, to everyone at Examiner Sport. A huge thanks to Oisín, and especially to Kevin Walsh. We'll be back soon.
Thanks, Paul.
It's only the Allianz Leagues. It's only February. only a warm-up. Only a relegation. Only a bit of fun. It's only a debut. Only hundreds of competitive matches and thousands of players giving it their all. Only an unstoppable passion for GA across the whole nation. It's only 30 years of Allianz supporting the leagues, and we're not done yet. Only the leagues, only the Allianz leagues.
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lads. And a small bit of a needle there. Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen between them, and now they're really roaring. And I can tell